Hi everyone, my name is Kathryn Koromilas and I'm really excited to be here as part of Hooked, the Young Readers and Writers Festival, to invite you to a little meditative practice, something that I do, which I call meditative writing. And this particular session today, I'm calling Writing as Meditation, Not Destination. It's my way of seeing writing as an act of and a practice towards staying present in the present moment. So if you know anything about meditation, meditation is a practice that we do to stay in the present moment. Our minds are really busy places, right? They're very dramatic places. They're very noisy. Our minds tend to have minds of their own, and they're always busy, either in the past or in the future. They rarely tend to settle into the present moment. And that's absolutely fine. Our minds have been engineered to be able to take care of us. So they often leap into the future to make sure that everything's sorted in the future. And they often check against past experience and knowledge to make sure that we have enough knowledge and experience to help us out in the present moment. So they're busy places, and it can get a bit exhausting keeping up with what our mind's up to. So a meditation practice gives us some free time away from the mind. So a lot of the meditation that you might have done, or if you're new to it, you might have at least heard of sitting meditation or breathing meditation. And in meditation of that sort, the breath serves as an anchor. So it basically serves literally as an anchor to kind of anchor your mind and ground you in the present moment. Breath is used because it's just a thing that your body does on repeat. So it's kind of just a really basic thing to keep coming back to. So you might be encouraged, if you're meditating, if you notice that your mind is off on a little tangent into the future, just to allow it. You know, meditation isn't about stopping your brain or your thoughts of doing what they do, but meditation is a way of inviting your thoughts and your mind back to the present moment, and focusing on breath is just a basic, simple thing to do because the breath is always there. It's always happening. And so it's something that you can always come back to. If you've done any walking meditation, then the body, your feet walking on the ground then acts as an anchor, because that movement is kind of a repetition. You don't have to really think about walking. It happens naturally. So you might be out walking and your mind's going off doing its little thing, and then you might bring it back to focus on your feet, just stepping one foot in front of the other. So in writing meditation, writing becomes that anchor of our attention. And I'm going to lead you through a writing activity, a couple actually, to give you some ideas of how you can use writing as a meditation. And so writing meditation or meditative writing typically involves writing with pen and paper. So today, if you're here, you need absolutely nothing at all apart, hopefully, from some paper and a pen. Now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the way I set myself up for a writing meditation. And so the focus then is to create a kind of ritual around writing as meditation. For example, with yoga, you might go to a nice quiet space in your house or to a yoga studio, and you've got your mat, and you might have a little cushion or a blanket. So there are things that kind of create the yoga ritual. If you're doing a breathing meditation, you might sit on your favorite meditation cushion, you might light a candle, or you might have some sort of things around you, like I have little Ganesh here, kind of to add to the ritual of the space and to make the space comfortable and safe and calming. That said, with any form of meditation, we don't ever depend on the place to be perfect. You might have your perfect little meditative corner. While I mentioned meditative corner, why don't you tell me if you happen to be watching me and you've got a comment box there, let me know where you're tuning in from. I'm in a little cottage in the southwest of Scotland, and I happen to be in a nice bright part of the house, but that doesn't mean that my ritual only takes place here. I can literally take my meditative practice anywhere. So these are going to be some tips for creating a meditative practice in writing, with writing, but literally you can take it anywhere. So some of the things that you might like to think about in future, or if you have with you today, a really nice journal. Usually we think that we can only write in pretty things if we have really pretty, perfect things to write, but that is so not the case with writing for meditation or for anything. Go and find yourself a really pretty thing, something bright maybe that makes you happy. I tend to use these journals. They're and the paper's just really lovely and smooth, and I just love writing on these. And you won't be able to see it on the screen, but I don't have the lined page. I have the dotted page, and that kind of allows for some really interesting things to happen on the page. You might like a blank page, or you might experiment with different pages. Also, try and find a pen that you really feel special about. Again, if you're going to do a meditative writing practice and you lose your pen, you can always do it. You don't have to have your tools with you. But when you can, it's always nice to have your favorite pen. And I'm currently using this lovely and it looks like I'm back. I feel like I dropped off for a bit, but hopefully you were listening to me when I was talking about my little favorite pen. It's my Lamy, and it's a fountain pen. So I'm trying to create my little meditative ritual with writing as you would with any other meditative ritual. What's really nice about a fountain pen is it's got a really nice scratching sound on the paper, which helps with focusing your attention, because you can actually, instead of say focusing on breathing as the anchor, the act of writing and the kind of sound that the writing makes on the page also serves as a gorgeous anchor to keep coming back to. So that's my preamble almost. I've got a bit more introductory comments to make. And I just want to say hi to Simon, who's watching from Newton Stewart. Hey, Simon, good to have you here. So the intention of meditative writing is to literally help you, like with all meditation, to remove any mental obstacles and to encourage mindful concentration. And if you're here for a writing session, probably you use writing as a creative practice too. So the act of meditative writing can also allow you to open up the door to your creative practice as well. What I like to do with meditative writing is to create a timed practice. So I tend to be very, very strict about how much time I allow myself with the page. Meditative writing usually allows you to go free form. So you literally just start writing and just start writing whatever comes to mind. The only problem that can ever occur from free writing is that you might spend a little bit too much time thinking or overthinking. And so a timed practice can really help you close the practice and then move on to something else. If you are feeling especially anxious or, sad one day when you're approaching the page, do make sure that you set yourself a timer. And most of the suggestions are that you would time yourself for a practice of between 10 and 20 minutes. So you wouldn't do more than 10 or 20 minutes of this sort of practice. If you're feeling particularly anxious, try and book case the beginning and the end of your practice with a self-pampering activity. So before the practice, do something special. Maybe make yourself a nice warm beverage, or set up a glass of milk and a cookie for afterwards. And then when you finish the practice, do have something nice prepared for afterwards. So again, maybe a warm bath or a beverage or a snack or a cookie or something like that. So something nice before and after. And let's make sure that we're comfortable in the space right now. So let's get started. Although writing tends to feel like it's a real intellectual pursuit, some sort of negotiation between your brain and your fingers, it actually really is a full body activity. So what I like to do is make sure that wherever I'm seated at the moment, I'm seated on a chair, but you might want to do this in the comfort of your bedroom, in your bed, or on a cushion, or on a yoga mat, or on the couch, or in a lounger, anywhere that you like. But make sure that you're kind of seated and your weight is really even and comfortable at the base of your spine. So just sort of, squiggle around on wherever you're sitting and make sure that your weight is comfy. And then you might want to stretch your shoulders, just stretch a bit. You might want to stretch up, and then you might want to wriggle your fingers. It's quite cold these days. Your fingers might be a bit tight and cold. So wriggle your fingers, warm them up. And one thing I think is really lovely to do is to rub your palms against each other, and that creates a really nice warmth and an electrifying energy between your palms. And it's probably quite a noisy practice on this stream, but it's well worth it. And there you go, you've got warmer hands, and even if you sort of press them against each other just like that, you can feel the energy there, and that's always really nice to feel, because you want to feel energized as well as calmed. And then just take a deep breath in and out, and just kind of sense where you're feeling your breath coming in. Do you feel it at the tip of your nose? Is it at your neck, your throat? Is it your temples? Just pay attention. It doesn't really matter where it is. You don't have to correct it. Just pay attention to where your breath is. But it's good to start with a breath, because we tend to forget to breathe. And so it's always nice to take that nice big breath. And over the course of the next few activities, I'll probably ask you to check in with your breath as well as when you start writing on the page. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. I want you to, if you're alone in the space right now and you can speak comfortably out loud, I want you to say this out loud. But if you're not alone, you can say it just, in your head. And then I'm going to ask you to write this down. So I just want you to say enough. So just quietly or just in a whisper. And take a deep breath. And take a deep breath. And enough. And enough. And this is part of a poem that I read on Wednesday when I did a similar session, and the poem is Enough. It's by David Whyte, W-H-Y-T. He's a lovely poet whose poems really are jewels of mindfulness and meditation. So he says, enough. These few words are enough. If not these words, this breath, take a deep breath. If not this breath, this sitting here, it's enough. And that's my invitation to you today, that whatever happens in the next 45 minutes, it's enough. Whatever you put on the page is enough. The words that you put are enough. Even just that you're sitting here with me for 45 minutes, that's enough. So I want you to give yourself permission to be enough for 45 minutes. And now I want you to take your pen, and on your bit of paper, or if you've got your favorite journal with you, just write the word enough, and write it slowly and write it beautifully. You might want to write it in a large, free writing. You might want to scribble it. Take some time with it. Enough. And just repeat it to yourself. It's enough. And just write down enough. You can put it at the top of the page, in the middle of the page, at the bottom of the page, wherever you put it. You can repeat it. You can write it round and round in a circle. Enough. Don't forget to breathe while you're writing that. And then below that or above that or on the side of that, wherever you want to write, I want you to write, these words are enough. These words are enough. And you can write it on an angle. You can write it in cursive writing. You can write in capital letters. Enough. These words are enough. And this breath is enough. And this sitting here is enough. So just write that down. Write that down. And don't forget to take a deep breath. Okay. So that's really by way of introduction, allowing us to remind ourselves that it's enough to just be in the present moment and just put a few words to the page. Okay, I'm going to introduce you to a meditative activity with writing now. And then I'm going to read you a poem and lead you through a slightly longer writing activity. So on a new bit of paper, and what you can do is open up to a double page spread. So what's going to happen is that on this page, on the left-hand side page, I'm going to invite you to just copy a poem and literally just copy word for word a poem in a slow, mindful way, just a calming way. You don't have to do anything but copy the words of a poet. And then I'm going to, on the other page, invite you to do something else. For now, let's just focus on this page. I'm going to start by reading you the first 2 lines of the poem without showing it to you first, just to kind of gauge the pace at which you'll be doing the copying. So it's going to be really slow for you. And what I'm going to suggest and to encourage you to do is that if you notice that your mind is starting to say, what's going on here? Is this going to be useful for me? How long is this going to take? What's happening? If your mind is doing this, if your mind is interjecting or disrupting or asking questions, then just let it do what it does. That's what our minds are for. You don't need to stop it. You don't need to correct your thoughts, but just keep inviting your mind back to the page and back to the writing and back to the letters that you're forming. So on the top of the left-hand side of your page, write this question: have I lived enough? So just write that question, and I'm going to let you sit with it and just think about it. And if your mind goes off, you can invite your mind back. Have I lived enough? Okay. And if your mind's gone off, bring it back to the page. And I don't know what writing you're going to use. I've just gone for a really basic print. Have I lived enough? Top of the left-hand side of the page. And just sit with it. You don't have to do anything with that question. We're just copying. And don't forget to keep breathing. And if your mind's gone off, invite it back to the page. And here's the second line. Have I loved enough? Have I loved enough? Just write that down and go slowly and invite your mind to focus to pay attention to each letter as you form it. Remember, in a writing meditation, the forming of the words is the anchor. So that's what you're going to keep inviting your mind back to, just the forming of the words. You don't have to think about the words yet. You don't have to do anything with them. You can just form them. And that's enough. Remember, that's enough. Okay. So as you form the words, this is the practice. Your mind might go off and question what you're doing, question if there's a purpose, question if there's a reason, question if anything will come of this. And that's okay, your mind does that, questions. Let the mind go off and then invite it back to the page. All right. So on that note, I'm going to introduce you to a poem. And I'm going to share it with you. And hopefully now you can see the poem. Just give me 2 minutes to get it properly up on the screen for you there. And at this point, you should be able to see Mary Oliver's I Go Down to the Shore. I'm going to read it to you first. This poem is from Mary Oliver's 1,000 Mornings. And 1,000 Mornings is a collection of some of her short poems. And one thing that is beautiful about these poems, if you want to begin practicing a morning meditative practice, is that they're all very short. And most of them fit on one side of the page. So you can do the copy work and then I'll show you what to do on the right-hand side. So it's from 1,000 Mornings by Mary Oliver, and this is the poem. So just sit. You might want to close your eyes and just listen to me read this poem for you. And I'll invite you to engage with the poem once I finish. So I Go Down to the Shore by Mary Oliver. Have I lived enough? Have I loved enough? Have I considered right action enough? Have I come to any conclusion? Have I experienced happiness with sufficient gratitude? Have I endured loneliness with grace? I say this, or perhaps I'm just thinking it. Actually, I probably think too much. Then I step out into the garden where the gardener, who is said to be a simple man, is tending his children, the roses. I'm going to read it one more time for you. I go down to the shore. Have I lived enough? Have I loved enough? Have I considered right action enough? Have I come to any conclusion? Have I experienced happiness with sufficient gratitude? Have I endured loneliness with grace? I say this, or perhaps I'm just thinking it. Actually, I probably think too much. Then I step out into the garden where the gardener, who is said to be a simple man, is tending his children, the roses. What I love about this poem is that it really captures what happens to our minds when they're busy asking questions and worrying about, have I done enough? Or have I lived enough? Or have I seen enough? And then in the final 3 lines, Mary Oliver just instantly switches away from that ruminating, away from that overthinking, and she steps into the garden and steps into the present mindful moment. And that's what mindfulness is all about. So my invitation to you now is to simply copy the poem. Literally copy the poem word for word on the left-hand side of your page. And if it goes over to the next page, that's okay. But I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to slowly copy each word, each letter. Pay attention to the punctuation points, to those question marks. Form them beautifully. If your mind goes off somewhere, that's okay. Let it go. And then invite it back to the page. So enjoy copying, and I'll see you in 5 minutes. And that is about 5 minutes, everyone. Take a deep breath as you just look at what you've got on the page. Have a think. How was that for you? If you do happen to be near the comments and you want to type something, let me know how that felt. Was it the first time that you just copied something? How was it? There's a question in the chat box. I'm quickly going to answer that one. And the question is, how many times I would recommend doing a meditative writing practice? And as with any meditation, every day, if writing is the way that you can find calm and attention in the present moment, then if writing is your meditation of choice, I would do it every day. I do this with Mary Oliver's 1,000 Mornings every day. It's a practice that I am very strict about time-wise, as I said, so nothing more than 10 to 20 minutes. If you find that you're writing, and I think you'll know what I mean when we finish the next activity. If your writing ends up working through a problem or finding a problem, James Pennebaker, who is the Canadian psychologist who recommended writing for therapy, so expressive writing for therapy, which is something related but slightly different to this particular practice. He recommended that you write through a problem only 2 or 3 times. So to do a 10 to 20 minute practice where you focus on the problem, and then if that practice isn't, if that problem isn't solved within 3 times, 3 meditative sessions, 3 expressive writing sessions, then go and see someone to talk about it. So as you can see in this poem, Mary Oliver has got a number of questions and concerns and worries about life in general. But by the end of the poem, she's able to reframe and just to step out into the garden, and ends on a hopeful, positive note. So if you find that in your 10 to 20 minutes, you can't get that mental shift happening into that positive presence, positive perspective, try it for 2 to 3 times. And if there's a persistent problem, then definitely you would need to go and have a chat with somebody. But if it's a pleasant experience, and if it's a calming, rejuvenating experience, I would totally do it every day. And Mary Oliver's little collection is perfect for it. But you might find also David White. So David, and White has some wonderful poems that you can choose to work with. So I hope that's answered the question. And of course, you can, I think up on the screen later on, my Twitter is going to appear. So please do contact me if you want to have a chat about this practice and how this practice, you can sort of develop it and mold it to suit your interests in terms of, poetic interests, and also sort of life interests and how it fits in. There is also writing and yoga, kind of an embodied writing practice. So there's absolutely so much to explore. So, and as you can tell, I'm very excited about it. All right, let's move on to the next part of the activity. So as I said, on the left-hand side page, you just copy the poem, and literally it's 5 minutes of not having to worry about anything. You don't have to worry about being original or interesting or doing anything at all. Literally, you just give yourself permission to copy, and that is enough. Remember, we gave ourselves permission for that to be enough at the beginning. On the right-hand side now, what we're going to do is a response or an imitation firstly. So you've got the poem here, and then on this side, start off with an imitation of the poem. And this actually is the step to creative practice. So a lot of creative practice happens from copying and imitating a poet that you really like, to get a feel for rhythm and vocabulary and syntax and punctuation. But in meditation, the practice of imitation is calming, and there's no pressure. You don't have to think too much about it because you can literally rely on the poem as a crutch. So by imitation, I mean you can start by have I lived. So you can start by repeating those words again on the right-hand side page, and then as soon as you feel you coming back, you can actually add your own words. If you like, you can respond to the questions. You can do anything you like with it. So start gently with an imitation and then go off and free write. And I'm going to give you 5 minutes just to free write. So this practice with all of my talking is taking a bit longer, but for you, if you were to do this again in the morning tomorrow or in the evening, it would be a 10 to 15 to 20 minute practice. So on that note, go off on the right hand side of the page, start imitating, and then start free writing. Without thinking. If your mind goes off, bring it back, invite it back to the beauty of the page. Don't forget to keep breathing, keep an eye on your posture, be comfy. You might want to stretch or just write. Enjoy. See you in 5 minutes. And that is 5 minutes. I hope that was interesting for you. If we were in the same room together, I would ask you to tell me how that was, what came on the page for you, and also how you feel. How does even your body feel? Do you feel relaxed or do you feel tight? How does your hand feel? How does your wrist feel? Are you using a pen or are you on the computer? I'd love to know what your practice is looking like right now. If you are here today because you're interested in writing or you write as part of a creative practice, one thing that really interests me about this activity is the idea of starting from without having expectations of having to produce something interesting or unique or even different. You just start with another voice and you start with that being enough. And then what happens when you go from the left-hand side to the right-hand side is there's almost a leap towards some creative you, which is always very interesting. So, you know what they say about creativity, there's actually nothing new and there's nothing original. Every story has been told and all our thoughts and all our ideas are so similar. So it's okay to start with a poem that belongs, let's say, to somebody else and just sit with it and then allow that to be the gentle push towards your own something. And in that space to find some quiet time, to quiet your mind, not keep rushing, not keep forming opinions. I think that when we approach poetry or anything on social media, we tend to be ready to have an opinion about it before we give ourselves the time just to sit with it and just to listen to it. So this practice is also a listening practice and a quietening practice and a calming practice. So I hope you like that, and I hope you totally fall in love with Mary Oliver just as I have. I'm just going to scroll up to show you the title of the book from which I have found this poem. It's 1,000 Mornings by Mary Oliver. And this is the book that I often use in the mornings doing this sort of practice. I'm going to show you one more little poem of hers. It's from a different book, and let me just scroll down to show you the name of the text from which this one is. And this is by a little collection of her poems called Felicity. And it was published by Little Brown in 2014. And this poem is amazing. So the poem is called Humility. And I'll just read it for you. You probably have already read it in your mind already. It's so short and lovely. Poems arrive ready to begin. Poets are the only transportation. Poems arrive. Poems arrive ready to begin. Poets are the only transportation. I don't know if any of you have read Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic. It's the book that Elizabeth Gilbert wrote about creativity. And in the book, she talks about, in fact, I think it's in the chapter called Enchantment. And in the book, she relates a story about an American poet whose name now escapes me. But this poet would tell Elizabeth Gilbert of some stories of how she encountered her own poems. Literally, she would be out in the field, just walking in the field, and she could feel a poem coming, like in the sky, in the clouds, you know, and she would have to run back home as fast as she could to get to her writing desk and her piece of paper and her pen before the poem landed, so that she could be there to just literally take the poem and transport it onto the page. The poem would arrive ready and she would just transport it ready on the page. And sometimes she told Elizabeth Gilbert the poem would be faster than her, so she wouldn't quite get to the table. And the poem was already there, so she'd have to grab it by the tail and bring it back and then put it on the page from the last line to the first line. So she'd start with the last line first and head up to the first line. So the poem was already there. Again, I think that's a comment about genius and originality, that you don't have to be more than just being with the page, and you are just enough, and whatever comes to the page is enough. And if you're calm, and if you give yourself time and space to listen, you never know, you might find that poem ready and you become the transporter to the page. I guess that's why Mary Oliver's called her poem Humility. So here's a little activity for you to do. I will give you 5 minutes, so you can take your time and just see where it takes you. So open up another double page spread, and this time you're going to start on the right hand side of the spread, or you might just have a bit of notepad paper or just a sheet of paper, whatever you're writing on. It doesn't really matter at all. But start from the bottom of the page and responding to Mary Oliver's poem, responding to the word humility, if you like, responding to whatever has come up today. You might want to go back to what you wrote in the previous activity and pick out some keywords or thoughts or ideas. And what you're going to do is you're going to write a poem backwards, and just take your time. So start with the bottom of the page and write a line. You don't have to write backwards, that would be hard, but you can give it a go if you like. So write a line and then write a line above it and then write a line above it. And all the while, don't forget to keep breathing and enjoying the words forming on the page, and keep going until you hear my voice bring you back. So I hope you enjoy writing a poem, or it could be a story, it can be bullet points, it can be a list, it can be a shopping list backwards, it can be anything you like, it can be a recipe backwards, it can be a speech, it can be an email, it can be anything you like. So I'll see you in 5 minutes. And that is about 5 minutes, everyone. So maybe put your pen down and take a deep breath. You might want to stretch and wriggle your fingers and just smile and take a deep breath. And remember, it is a timed activity, so it's time to put the notebook away. So put it away because you've done your practice for the day and you're ready to go off into your day. Maybe you've prepared a nice little self-care routine for after your meditation. Maybe you're going to go for a walk or have that milk and biscuit. Remember to step out of the meditation and maybe even just move your body a bit. Put some music on and dance. I hope you enjoyed that little practice, and I hope it's something that you feel that you can take away with you and find your own way into it. I hope if you come up with any poems that are particularly nice to do something like this with, do let me know on Twitter. I'm always looking for new poems to keep company with in the morning. As I said, I do this practice in the mornings. I wake up quite early in the morning and I really enjoy my quiet time with my poems. But I think the evenings are also good. In fact, any time of the day, even if you grab your notebook and escape into a little quiet room, a little corner, and you just need 5 minutes, 5-10 minutes. So it's a great little practice. And by virtue of copying and engaging so deeply with these amazing poets or even short story writers or novelists, if you are a creative person, if you are writing creatively or writing a memoir or anything at all, it's really a great way to improve your own writing skills. So on that note, thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope to hear from you or see you again. Enjoy your day. Thank you and goodbye.